In the summer of 2007, Real Madrid faced an impossible challenge. For more than a decade, the left side of their defense had belonged to one man, Roberto Carlos, a player whose thunderous free kicks, blistering pace and relentless attacking runs had made him one of the greatest fullbacks football had ever seen. Replacing a legend is never easy. Replacing Roberto Carlos seemed almost impossible. Yet Real Madrid believed they had found their answer. An 18-year-old from Brazil named Marcelo. Fresh from Fluminense, Marcelo arrived in Madrid carrying enormous expectations. Not because of what he had already achieved, but because of who everyone expected him to replace. From the very first day, the comparisons began. Could he become the next Roberto Carlos? Did he have what it took to wear the famous white shirt? Or had Real Madrid made a mistake? The pressure didn't stop there. Back home in Brazil, the questions were exactly the same. Roberto Carlos had owned the left-back position for both club and country. Now a teenager was expected to follow in his footsteps. It was a burden few young players could have carried. Marcelo wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the strongest. And defensively, he still had plenty to learn. Critics questioned whether he was ready for a club where anything less than success was considered failure. Some believed he would never live up to the expectations placed upon him. But Marcelo had never wanted to become the next Roberto Carlos. He simply wanted the chance to prove he belonged. What nobody realized was that football wasn't about to witness the arrival of another Roberto Carlos. It was about to discover the world's first Marcelo. Life at Real Madrid was nothing like life in Brazil. Every training session, every match, every mistake was judged under the brightest spotlight in world football. Marcelo's talent was obvious. His close control, fearless dribbling and creativity made him look more like a winger than a defender. But that was also the problem. Many questioned whether he could actually defend. Real Madrid managers weren't completely convinced. Fabio Capello often preferred the experience of Gabriel Heinz. For Marcelo, opportunities were limited. He could have let the criticism define him. Instead, he chose to learn. He studied the demands of European football. He worked on his positioning, his decision-making, his fitness. Slowly, the exciting teenager began to mature into a complete fullback. Each season, he looked more comfortable in the famous white shirt. Then came the moment everything changed. When the established players moved on, Marcelo didn't just fill the space they left behind. He made the position his own. The Bernabeu, once unsure of their young Brazilian, began to fall in love with the joy he brought to the game. Every burst down the left wing, every clever flick, every impossible piece of skill. He played with a smile that reminded people football was meant to be enjoyed. The comparisons with Roberto Carlos hadn't disappeared. But something was changing. People were no longer asking whether Marcelo could replace a legend. They were beginning to realize he was creating a legacy of his own. By the early 2010s, the question had changed. People were no longer asking if Marcelo could replace Roberto Carlos. They were asking something entirely different. Had Real Madrid found a player who was rewriting the role of a left-back? Marcelo didn't play like defenders of the past. He attacked with the freedom of a winger, created chances like a midfielder, and possessed the flair of a Brazilian street footballer. His first touch, his close control, his confidence to take on defenders, made him one of the most entertaining players in world football. Then came one of football's most devastating partnerships. On the left wing, Marcelo and Cristiano Ronaldo. Whenever Ronaldo drifted inside, Marcelo exploded into the space behind him. Time and again, his overlapping runs stretched defenses to breaking point. Together, they became one of the most feared combinations in Europe. His performances helped Real Madrid enter one of the greatest eras in the club's history. La Liga titles, Champions League triumphs, Club World Cups. Again and again, Marcelo was at the heart of it all. Not with thunderous free kicks or unstoppable power like Roberto Carlos, but with elegance, imagination, and a smile that never disappeared. The comparisons that had followed him since arriving in Madrid slowly faded away, because football fans had realized something. Marcelo wasn't trying to become the next Roberto Carlos. He had become something even more special. Marcelo. Conquering Real Madrid was one thing. Winning over Brazil was another challenge entirely. For years, the famous number 3 shirt had belonged to Roberto Carlos. Now, it belonged to Marcelo. Every performance was measured against a legend who had helped Brazil win the 2002 World Cup. But Marcelo never tried to imitate him. Where Roberto Carlos relied on explosive power and thunderous strikes, Marcelo relied on intelligence, technique, and creativity. He proved there was more than one way to become a great Brazilian left-back. Representing Brazil, Marcelo featured in World Cups, Copa America tournaments, and helped his country lift the 2013 FIFA Confederations Cup. He also captained his nation on occasions, becoming one of the senior figures in a talented generation. Although international football never brought him the World Cup trophy that Roberto Carlos had won, his place among Brazil's finest defenders was no longer in doubt. Back in Madrid, the trophies continued to arrive. Champions League after Champions League. League titles. Club World Cups. By the time he wore the captain's armband, the teenager once asked to replace Roberto Carlos had become one of the most decorated players in Real Madrid's extraordinary history. The impossible task was complete, not because Marcelo had become another Roberto Carlos, but because he had shown the world that greatness doesn't have to look the same. Sometimes, it creates its own path. Time has a way of changing football. The questions that once seemed impossible eventually answer themselves. Marcelo's journey with Real Madrid came to an end after 16 unforgettable years. During that time, he won 6 La Liga titles, 5 UEFA Champions Leagues, numerous domestic and international trophies, and became one of the most decorated players in the club's history. The teenager, once doubted by many, had become a Real Madrid captain and a club legend. But Marcelo's story wasn't quite finished. In 2023, he returned home to Fluminense, the club where it had all begun. For many players, returning home is simply a farewell. For Marcelo, it became another chapter of greatness. He helped Fluminense win the Copa Libertadores for the first time in their history, giving the club that had believed in him its greatest ever triumph. It was the perfect ending to an extraordinary career. When people remember Roberto Carlos, they remember power, speed, and one of the greatest left-backs football has ever seen. When people remember Marcelo, they remember joy, creativity, fearlessness, and a player who played the game with a smile. Both wore the famous number 3. Both became legends for Real Madrid and Brazil. But neither needed to be the other. Marcelo never replaced Roberto Carlos. He did something even harder. He made football stop asking who would replace Roberto Carlos, and start asking a new question. Who could ever replace Marcelo? Football is often obsessed with comparisons. Who was better? Who came first? Who replaced who? But sometimes, the greatest players can't be measured that way. Roberto Carlos changed the role of a left-back. Marcelo reinvented it for a new generation. One inspired the other. Together, they set a standard that few have ever reached. From an 18-year-old carrying impossible expectations, to a Real Madrid captain, a 5-time Champions League winner, a Copa Libertadores champion, and one of the most decorated players in football history. Marcelo's career wasn't built on living in someone else's shadow. It was built on creating a legacy that was entirely his own. Years from now, when young left-backs dream of reaching the top, some will still study Roberto Carlos. Others will study Marcelo, because in the end, he didn't just replace a legend. He became one himself. Now it's over to you. If you were building your all-time team and could only choose one, who would you have at left-back? Roberto Carlos or Marcelo? Let us know your choice in the comments below.